the motion is as Councillor Smith.
Would you like me to repeat it, Chair?
Yeah.
So the motion is 2 seconds. That the committee requests the attendance of the executive member at a future meeting to report on developments to planning policy and answer questions on this matter.
Okay, thank you.
Seconded.
And that's seconded by Councillor Rudin. So does anybody want to talk about that before we take a vote? No? So all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, moving on. So the only item that we have now is item number 7, 29 Mitchell Deaver Way, about the fence. Can we have our officer's report, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. I am Kylie Cousins, the case officer for this case. This application relates to a detached property in Mitchell Deaver Way on the corner of Popham Close. The proposal is for the replacement of the existing 2-metre high wooden fence following the removal of the existing conifer hedge to the side of the property, which faces onto Popham Close. The fence will be in the same position as the existing, which is at a lower level than the adjoining footpath, and the proposal includes the use of concrete posts and gravel boards with a privet hedge planted between the fence and the back edge of the footpath, with the fence continuing at the back of the parking space to the garage. As the conifer hedge is being removed, planning permission is required, as the fence would then be considered to be adjacent to a highway. However, the existing fence could be replaced with a 2-metre high fence if the hedge was not being removed, as the hedge constitutes an intervening feature. The hedge could then be removed at a later date without the need for planning permission. This is considered to be a fallback position, which needs to be taken into account. The application is being considered by the Planning Committee as more than 5 objections have been received and members visited the site last Saturday. I would like to draw members' attention to the supplementary report, which contains further representations received since the report was written. The site is located within the settlement boundary, and as such, the principle of the development is considered to be acceptable. Due to the nature of the development, it would not result in any adverse impact on the living conditions of the neighbouring occupiers. The application has been amended during the course of the application, as originally a brick wall with fence panel inserts was proposed closer to the highway, and the boundary treatment has now been revised to allow for a 0.7 metre wide landscaping strip. Whilst it is acknowledged that part of the new fence will be visible, whilst the proposed landscaping establishes, consideration must be given to the permitted development fallback position, and also the fact that the hedge could be removed without the need for planning permission, exposing the existing fence. In light of this revised scheme, it's now considered acceptable in terms of highway safety and its impact on character of the area, with the added benefit of the proposed landscaping being secured by condition. These are photos showing other boundary treatments in the area. Finally, the recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives contained on page 60 to 61 of the agenda. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee for the officer? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I've got a few on this one. I will start with the officer just mentioned in her presentation, and I think also in the committee report, that the fence will be visible whilst the new hedge establishes. Can I just clarify, is that the case, that ultimately the new hedge would conceal the fence, or is it the case that actually the fence would remain visible long term? As my understanding is that it's a low privet hedge and would be maintained as such.
Thank you for your question. The proposed planting size is between 40 and 60 centimetres, with a density of 3 to 4 plants per metre, with the privet hedge being maintained at approximately 1.2 metres.
So it will be lower than the
Yes,
actual fence.
but the applicant could allow it to grow higher.
Yeah. Yes, that's what's happened with this one, with the current one, I suppose. Other questions? Councillor Smith again.
Okay, then. Moving on then, the height of the fence, I understand there's an existing fence in that location. Could we confirm firstly just the height of the new fence relative to the existing fence? And also, could we get clarification on where that's actually measured from? Because I noted specifically from our site visit at the weekend that the land height levels on the two sides of the fence differ by a reasonable amount. It's quite a bit lower in the applicant's garden than it is on the public highway side. So are we measuring from the garden or are we measuring from the highway?
The officer like to respond?
Thank you for your question. We're measuring from the garden, which is lower than the highway.
I think that was in the report, to be honest. Councillor Smith again.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't sure I saw that clearly in the report, but is that clear in terms of conditions, or is that shown on the submitted drawings? I just want to ensure that there is clarity in terms of what the applicant can and can't build, where they're measuring from when they do so.
Thank you for your question. The applicant confirmed the height. The height will be 1.8 metres from the roadside due to the level difference. Sorry, 2 metres. But yes, it will be in exactly the same position as the existing fence.
Councillor Smith again.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure that was. I want to establish clearly that the fence is 2 metres. I understand the answer a second ago was that 2 metres is measured from the garden side. I'm just trying to establish where that's documented. Is that clearly shown in the applicant's drawings, or is that covered in any of our planning conditions? Because I think that's quite important, because that's potentially my estimate is about a 300mm difference depending on where you measure it from.
Officer. Yeah.
Madam Chair, maybe if I could answer this question. So the applicant has confirmed that it is the replacement of an existing 2-metre high wooden fence, although the height does vary because of the level changes. And we know that on the garden side, as we can see in the photograph at the moment, that fence is 20 to 30 centimetres lower than the highway. So if we have a 2-metre high fence in that position, then from the highway, it would be 1.8 metres in height maximum. Hopefully that will answer your question.
Thank you. Can I ask, will the fence be the same height as the brick gateway that we can see in the photograph there? When it's in place, or is it going to be taller?
Madam Chair, if I can just answer that question, it will be approximately the same height. I have to say we didn't measure the archway on site, but it will be very similar.
Thank you. I think somebody said that sort of doorways in general are 2 metres high, and if the fence is next to it, I guess that's going to be the same. Come to think of it, does that make sense?
I would say it's going to be about the height of that brick pier, but again, these aren't measurements that were taken on site.
No, that's right. Any other questions from anybody else? Councillor Smith again.
I'm sorry, Chair, I appear to be running the show this evening. My next question then is, and as you'll be aware, this is the ward I represent, and I'm aware of a few cases in the area where boundary treatments have been particularly controversial around Forest Park. The history of the Forest Park area and the developer of the Forest Park area has always been very much against hard boundary treatments close to the highway, and there's quite a well-established precedent there that it's either soft boundary treatments or it's stepped back quite considerably. And I think, I mean, the officer showed us some images a moment ago of other examples of hard boundary treatments in the area, but they did come up quite quickly. I don't know if we can maybe bring some of them back. My feeling is that they are primarily stepped further back from the public highway than is the case in this case. So my question is that there is a precedent in Forest Park regards this specifically. I know we've had other issues where we've enforced against residents putting boundary treatments there.
This bit for the debate, and we'll
look
at the pictures.
I'm getting to the question. Apologies, Chair. The key of the question is: could the officers explain to us clearly what is the precedent in Forest Park? Because it clearly is different to other areas of the borough. There are specific ways that we seem to be handling boundary treatments there. Are there clear rules as to when is a fence acceptable, when is it not acceptable? How do we make that judgment?
I'm not certain there is a rule. They're all very different. Perhaps we can.
Madam Chair, so each case has to be dealt with on its merits. In this case, we have demonstrated that there is a fallback position which weight has to be attributed to. I know that there have been cases in Forest Park where owners of properties have recited their boundary treatment and encroached onto amenity land. However, this is not the case here. So what I would conclude is that each case has to be dealt with on its merits.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. As a supplementary to, I do appreciate every case needs to be considered on its own merits, but I think when we're talking about arguments, particularly of character, which is what a lot of the objections to this application bring up, you can't consider character in isolation. It's a principle of the context. And do we have any other examples of a fence at only 700 millimetres from the public highway in the near surrounding area?
I would say actually it used to be like that before the hedge grew. It's the same, is it not?
Well, I intend to ask about that in a minute, Chair.
Would you like to comment? Yeah.
Well, I think the photograph that we have before us probably shows the fence closer to the highway. But as Madam Chair said, this was the case before the conifer hedge was allowed to grow to its current height. So in this particular case, the fence itself is not being recited. It's being replaced in the same position.
Thank you. Is this a question?
It is a question, Chair. Sometimes questions need a little bit of contextual explanation.
I appreciate that.
It is a question.
Careful.
Sorry, just to gather my thoughts on that. So yes, I acknowledge there is an existing fence there. Can I ask, is that fence original, or at what point do we know that? When did that fence come into existence?
I can't confirm if it was original, but it certainly has been there more than 10 years, and it's certainly lawful.
Yep.
Thank you, Chairman. So coming back to the point of the wider context, I'm aware that there are other instances of fences being erected, in some case having been there for a significant period of time, and then our enforcement officers requiring them to be removed. I'm just trying to establish a fence has been put up behind a hedge. If it was always there, that is a different situation to if the fence had been put up at a later point and concealed by the hedge, and obviously hadn't been an issue because it's concealed by the hedge, but is now about to be revealed. So could the officer speak to that? I'm just trying to clarify. You know, if there hadn't been a hedge there and there hadn't been a fence, and then a new fence was put there, would we have sought enforcement against that as we have in other instances in the nearby area?
If it required planning permission, then yes. If it was brought to our attention as well.
What was this? So I can't think, you know, sorry, I've lost for words now. It is as it is at the moment, and there are you know, the things that the householder can do that would just replace the fence and then the hedge, and nothing could be done about that. So where do we go from this? I think that's enough questions, really. Can we debate, please? Would you like to comment?
Sorry, Chair, I have further questions. We've not been debating this for a particularly long time. Is there a particular reason why we're closing questions at this stage?
Well, we can say things in debate that you seem to be saying, so you can put your points and then we can discuss them.
Okay, but I do have further questions for the officers, if that's okay.
Right, I'll take two more.
Okay, I'm concerned that the chair is limiting questions, legitimate. I feel legitimate questions from members. I'm sure members would like to get home, but I feel this. You know, we have a resident in the room who I know has objected on this. We should be going to the effort to discuss this fully.
Right.
And we should ensure that particularly the concerns that have been raised by residents are discussed fully by the committee before we make a decision. Otherwise, we're not in a position to make the decision.
How many questions do you have?
I do have two on my sheet. We'll see what else comes up as the officers ask, but I'm just concerned as to why we're seeing it fit to limit questions.
Let's get on with it then, shall we? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the permitted development fallback position, and I think this might be best deferred to the legal advisor. I just wanted to understand the role of the committee is obviously to determine the application, and a critical test for that is whether or not the decision would stand on appeal. I'm just trying to understand. I realise the applicant could do this, we believe, by permitted development at that point, but does that mean that you know, we can't legitimately make a decision otherwise on the basis of our policies, particularly our policies around character of the area and impact on the character of the area?
Assistant Chief.
Through you, Chair. Yes, the position with the fallback position is that it's a material consideration in the determination of the application. So it doesn't mean that an alternative view can't be taken, but it is required on members to take it into account in the decision-making process as a material consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have another question then?
I do just have one final question then, Chair. Residents should maybe be aware that this may be contrary to existing covenants they have. I'm aware that covenants are not a material planning consideration, but can we just get clarification that any decision we make today does not prejudice those covenants and the ability of residents to pursue those separately should they wish to?
Assistant Chief.
Through you, Chair. Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise for being difficult there, but I do feel it's important we have a full and thorough discussion.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question now. I just really want to understand the fallback position. Is it correct that the applicant could replace the fence under permitted development without the need to have this planning application approved? They could then remove the hedge without any issues because there aren't any policies or legal reasons why they cannot remove the hedge, and then not replant it, in which case, to me, that would appear to be a worse outcome than having the planning application approved. Is that correct?
That is correct. So in terms of restrictions, planning permission is not required to remove a hedge. Whether there are any other restrictions, then that's not really a planning matter.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions on this one, please? No. Okay, let's move to debate, please. Councillor Virgo.
Thanks, Chair. I first of all apologise, I didn't go to the recce actually at this, but I have been to see it 2 days ago on my own. Look, I can understand residents being upset when things change. I do get that. You know, and I remember something in Wingfield Row where someone put up a fence and I thought, oh my goodness, this is out of keeping. But actually, you know, I saw it the other day and I didn't even think about it. So it just fits in. And I think on this case, to be absolutely honest, I can't see a reason to object to this. I mean, the fence was there originally. The hedge which they're suggesting is a small hedge which will soften that. And I'd like to commend the officer to a certain extent because she pursued better fencing and style of fencing. So I have to say, in my opinion, I can't go against officer's recommendations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else to speak? Councillor Penfold.
I just had some concerns when we were looking at it. So sad as it would be to lose the hedge, there is a considerable chunk of it that is actually dead, and probably it will spread to other things. And so that part at least would have to be replaced. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else to speak? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I know this is just a fence, and it feels like a simple thing, but I also know as the ward representative that there are residents who feel very passionately about this. My primary concern is with regards the impact on the character of the area, and I do believe that there is something specific about the Forest Park area and how we have historically treated boundary treatments in Forest Park. We do have hard boundary treatments, but by and large, where you can find examples of those in Forest Park, they are set back substantially from the public highway. Certainly not within 700 millimetres. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm also aware of instances where, and I appreciate every case is unique and needs to be considered on its own merits. But I do make that point that when we're considering something like the character, you cannot just think about that in isolation. You have to look at the wider area. You have to look at the precedents that are set. And my feeling is that this doesn't really fit with that. And I know that we have quite aggressively enforced against fences in similar positions in other areas of Forest Park. So I do have concerns that we're not being internally consistent as a council in how we approach and treat that, treating some residents one way and other residents another way. I hope that might be looked into a bit more and we can get a bit more clarity about exactly what is and is not acceptable as boundary treatments in the Forest Park area. I do ultimately take the point with regards to the fallback position. I am concerned that we don't seem to know whether this was an original feature or not. It does seem somewhat permitted development by the back door, and I'm not saying this is what the applicant has done, but we don't know that it's not. If there was a hedge that was the original boundary treatment and then a fence has been erected behind it at some point, and now we're in a position where, if that hedge hadn't been there, would that fence have been permitted, and would there be a fallback position in the first place? We obviously could never have enforced against a fence that we couldn't see, but I from the way other applications for fences had been treated within the nearby area, we have quite aggressively enforced against that. So I'm concerned about that, but I do take the officer's advice that does exist as a fallback position at this point. Ultimately, this is like all planning. This is about change, and change is difficult, and change is not always popular. And I don't think there's any decision here that can fully satisfy all residents. I think we're having to make actually quite a tricky decision. I know it is about something as simple as a fence, but I think it's important to recognise that there's no single decision here that is fully fair to all residents, which is quite difficult. I'm genuinely not sure about this one, if I'm honest. Just for the benefit of members, that there is a blue sheet available should we decide to refuse it. I'm not moving that at this point, but it is available should other members wish to. I would like to request, I've been requested by the residents, and I don't believe there's any reason I can't do this on their behalf, to request for a recorded vote in relation to this. I don't believe there's any conflict in doing that. No, so I would like to move that request, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councillor Ijaz online who would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to concur with Councillor Virgo's understanding, and as he has personally gone there and visited, I don't have that benefit. I only have seen the pictures and read the officer's report, and I am minded that the officer's findings are correct. I understand difficulty Councillor Smith is facing because this is his resident who is unhappy, and he has to ask all these very important and prudent questions. But in the end of the day, it does sit very well at the moment, and I don't see any problems with accepting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Collins, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I can't believe that the fence would not have been there. I think every resident is entitled to privacy in their own rear garden, and therefore I cannot believe that only a newly planted hedge would have been there when the property was built. And therefore I think we should take that into consideration too. The resident of the property has rights as well as the objectors.
Thank you. Councillor Zahoruddin.
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with Councillor Smith's point about character should be consistent. However, considering the fact that the replacement of fence and the hedge, potentially the removal of hedge in the future, could have all been gone through PD route, I believe the applicant has done a right thing by applying for permission. I don't find any really strong hook in our policies that we could hold to reject this proposal or recommendation. Therefore, I find it very difficult not to vote in favor for this. So I'll be voting in favor for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? I should have put the motion before we debated, of course. Yeah, perhaps I'll do that now. I propose the motion yes, recommendation as outlined on page 60 of the agenda and informed by page 1 of the supplementary report. Yes, Vice Chair.
I second that.
Oh, yeah. God. I had a thought about this, the position of this fence before I go to the vote, my little pennyworth. This house has a garden that is side on to the road, and I think that it would have had a taller fence, certainly to the back garden. So the wooden fence would probably have been there, but it has been softened all the way along and right around the front with a hedge, which has probably grown far larger than it ever used to be. And some of it has now been removed because so that picture is not quite accurate. So my inclination is also to approve what's been put before us. So saying that, can I have a vote recorded of those in agreement with the motion?
So that's 8 in favour.
I should have said the names. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
4.
Councillor Collins.
4.
Councillor Eggleston.
4.
Councillor Frewer.
4.
Councillor Penfold.
4.
Councillor Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Zaharuddin.
4.
Councillor Virgo.
4.
So that's carried.
Thank you very much. And that's the end of our meeting this evening. Thank you very much for your patience with everything that's happened tonight. See you next month, if not before. Oh, you're flying. Thank you.